The moment my daughter-in-law said, "We got married yesterday," I realized something far more painful than being forgotten had just happened. I had been erased. My name is Evelyn Parker. I am 72 years old, and until that phone call, I believed my son and I were still close. Not the kind of close where we talked every day. Life changes that. Children grow up. They build families of their own. But I believed I still mattered. I believed that when something important happened in my son Michael's life, I would hear about it before the rest of the world did. I was wrong. It happened on a Tuesday afternoon. I was sitting at my kitchen table with a travel brochure open in front of me. Michael had mentioned months earlier that he and Chloe were planning a wedding. No date had been announced, but I had been setting aside money for airfare and a hotel because they lived nearly 1,000 miles away. I wanted to be prepared. I remember smiling as I picked up my phone. I expected a simple conversation. Maybe they had finally chosen a venue. Maybe invitations were about to go out. When Chloe answered, she sounded cheerful. Almost too cheerful. "Hi, Evelyn," she said. "How are you?" We exchanged a few polite sentences before I asked the question. "So, when is the wedding?" There was a pause. Not a long one. Just enough to make me notice. Then she laughed softly. "Oh, we got married yesterday." I honestly thought I had misunderstood her. "Yesterday?" I asked. "Yes," she replied. "It was beautiful." I sat there staring at the wall in front of me. The refrigerator hummed in the background. A clock ticked somewhere in the house. Everything suddenly felt distant. "Yesterday?" I repeated. "You mean the ceremony already happened?" "Yes," she said. "We decided to keep it small." Small. That word stayed with me long after the call ended. Small did not explain why nobody told me. Small did not explain why I was learning about my son's wedding after it was over. Small did not explain why I had spent months expecting an invitation that was never coming. After we hung up, I sat motionless for several minutes. Then I opened Facebook. I wish I had not. The first photograph appeared immediately. Chloe in a white dress. Michael smiling beside her. A beautiful outdoor ceremony beneath a row of oak trees. I clicked the next image. Then another. Then another. My heart sank with each photograph. It was not a small wedding. I saw cousins, aunts, friends, co-workers, neighbors, people I recognized from family gatherings years ago. Nearly everyone seemed to be there. Everyone except me. I kept scrolling. At one point, I counted more than 60 guests. 60. Yet somehow there had not been room for the groom's mother. What hurt most was not the wedding itself. It was the realization that this secret had required planning. People had known. People had received invitations. People had booked flights and bought gifts. And during all those months, nobody had picked up a phone and said, "Evelyn, there is something you should know." As evening approached, I stared at one final photograph. Michael and Chloe were smiling at the camera while friends surrounded them. Everyone looked happy. Everyone looked comfortable. And for the first time, a question entered my mind that I could not ignore. If my own son did not tell me he was getting married, what else had been happening behind my back? 8 o'clock that evening came and went, yet I was still sitting at the same kitchen table. The travel brochure remained open where I had left it, a reminder of plans that suddenly seemed foolish. Every few minutes I found myself opening Facebook again, as if the photographs might somehow change. They never did. The same smiling faces. The same wedding decorations. The same celebration I had not been invited to attend. What troubled me most was not Chloe. We had never been especially close. We were polite, cordial, careful around one another. The real question was Michael. My son knew me. He knew I would have traveled any distance to be there. He knew I had saved money for months because I assumed a wedding invitation would eventually arrive. Most of all, he knew I would never have created drama or made the day about myself. So why had he stayed silent? The next morning I woke up hoping I had overreacted. Sometimes a night of sleep helps untangle painful thoughts. Instead, I felt worse. As I made coffee, memories began resurfacing. Small moments I had dismissed over the years. Chloe insisting on hosting holidays at her house, but never sharing the details until the last minute. Family gatherings that somehow changed dates after I had already arranged transportation. Vacation photos appearing online from trips I had never heard about. Individually, none of those moments seemed important. Together, they painted a different picture. A picture of someone slowly being moved farther and farther from the center of a family. Around noon, my friend Karen Mitchell called. She had seen the wedding photographs too. "Evelyn," she said carefully. I did not know whether to call. Her hesitation told me everything. You knew about it? I asked. Silence filled the line. Karen, I received an invitation 3 months ago, she admitted quietly. My stomach dropped. 3 months. Not 3 days. Not 3 weeks. 3 months. I sat down immediately. 3 months. I assumed you already knew, she said. You are Michael's mother. For a moment I could not speak. Karen continued. Honestly, I thought you were helping organize it. The pain I felt then was different from the shock of the previous day. This was confirmation. The exclusion had not been accidental. It had not been rushed. It had been planned. After I ended the call, I walked into the living room and stared at a framed photograph of Michael as a teenager. He was standing beside his father, smiling proudly after winning a high school award. Back then, if something important happened, I was the first person he called. Somewhere along the way, that changed. My phone suddenly rang. Michael's name appeared on the screen. I stared at it for several seconds before answering. Mom, he said softly. We need to talk. Something in his voice made me pause. He did not sound happy. He did not sound newly married. He sounded worried. And for the first time, I began to wonder if the wedding itself was only part of the story. For several seconds, neither of us spoke. I could hear traffic in the background on Michael's end of the call and the faint sound of a car door closing. He sounded tired. More tired than I had ever heard him. Mom, he said again, I know you are upset. I stared out the kitchen window toward my backyard. Do I have a reason not to be? Another long silence followed. I wanted to tell you. The answer should have comforted me. Instead, it raised even more questions. Then why did you not? I asked. Michael, people received invitations months ago. He seemed surprised. Who told you that? Karen. The moment I said her name, he exhaled heavily. I figured this would happen. Something about that sentence immediately caught my attention. Not because of what he said, but because of what he did not say. He did not deny it. He did not tell me Karen was mistaken. He did not claim the wedding had been arranged at the last minute. How long had this been planned? I asked quietly. Several months, he admitted. The honesty hurt more than another excuse would have. I closed my eyes. Then every time we spoke on the phone, every holiday, every birthday call, you already knew. Mom, you already knew. My voice remained calm, but my heart felt heavy. Michael lowered his voice. Things became complicated. There it was. The explanation people always use when they do not want to explain anything. Complicated. I had heard that word many times in my life. It usually meant someone was hiding the real reason. Complicated how? I asked. He hesitated. Chloe felt that a smaller circle would reduce stress. I almost laughed. Smaller circle. 60 guests were not a smaller circle. Was Karen reducing stress? I asked. What about your coworkers? Your college friends? Your cousins? He did not answer. The silence spoke for him. Then something unexpected happened. Michael asked a question of his own. Have you looked at all the wedding photos? Unfortunately, yes. Did you notice anything unusual? I frowned. What do you mean? Just look again. Before I could ask another question, he ended the call with a promise to call later. The conversation left me more confused than before. That evening I opened Facebook once again and slowly examined every image. At first, nothing seemed strange. Smiling guests, decorations, toasts, family photographs. Then I noticed something. In almost every group picture, one person was missing. Not me, Chloe's father. I scrolled through dozens of photographs. He never appeared. Neither did her mother. Neither did her brother. That seemed impossible. What wedding takes place without either side of the family fully present? Suddenly, I remembered something Karen had mentioned years ago. Chloe rarely spoke about her relatives. In fact, I realized I had never met most of them. The more I looked, the more questions surfaced. Then a new photograph appeared online. It had just been posted by one of Michael's friends. My breath caught instantly. Standing in the background was a man I did not recognize. Yet Michael was shaking his hand as if they knew each other well. And judging by the expression on Chloe's face, she desperately wished that photograph had never been posted. The next morning, I could not stop thinking about the photograph. I enlarged it several times on my tablet, studying every face. The unfamiliar man stood near the edge of the reception area, dressed in a dark suit, speaking with Michael. What caught my attention was not the man himself. It was Chloe. Everyone else in the photograph appeared relaxed. Chloe looked tense. Her smile seemed forced, and her eyes were fixed directly on the camera as if she had just realized the picture was being taken. I saved the image and continued searching through the wedding album. The more photographs I reviewed, the more unusual details I noticed. Certain guests appeared repeatedly. Others seemed carefully absent. Chloe's family was almost invisible. By late afternoon, my curiosity had become something stronger. I needed answers. I called Karen. "Do you recognize this man?" I asked after sending her the photograph. A few minutes later, she called back. "Actually, I think I do." My heart immediately sped up. "Who is he?" Karen hesitated. "I am not completely certain, but I saw him at the restaurant months ago." "What restaurant?" "The Grand Oak downtown." That surprised me. The Grand Oak was one of the most expensive venues in the county. "Why were you there?" I asked. "My niece had a rehearsal dinner there last spring." Then she lowered her voice. "Evelyn, I remember seeing Chloe there with event planners. They were discussing seating charts." I sat up straighter. "Months ago. At least 6 months ago." 6 months. The number echoed in my mind. According to Chloe, everything had been small and simple. According to the photographs, the wedding had been large. Now Karen was telling me the planning had started at least half a year earlier. None of it matched. Later that evening, Michael called again. This time his voice sounded even more strained. "Mom, I need you to trust me." "Then tell me the truth," I replied. "I am trying." "No," I said quietly. "You are explaining around the truth." Silence followed. Finally he sighed. "There were disagreements about the guest list." Disagreements. Chloe and I argued about it for months. I felt a knot form in my stomach. "And the solution was to remove your mother?" He did not answer. That answer alone told me more than words could. Then he said something unexpected. "There is something else I found out after the wedding." My grip tightened on the phone. "What?" "I do not have proof yet." "Proof of what?" Another pause. "Proof that someone has not been honest with me." The statement hung between us. Before I could ask another question, he changed the subject and ended the call. I sat alone in my living room long after dark, thinking about everything I had learned. The wedding had been planned for months. Invitations had been sent. Important details had been hidden. Michael sounded worried rather than newly married. And now he was questioning someone's honesty. As I prepared for bed, my email notification sounded. A new message had arrived from an unfamiliar address. There was no greeting, no signature, only a single sentence. "If you want to know why you were excluded, look at who paid for the wedding." For several minutes I stared at the anonymous email. The message was so short that it almost seemed meaningless. Yet something about it felt deliberate. Whoever sent it knew exactly which question had been haunting me. Why had I been excluded? Not why the wedding happened. Not why invitations were sent. Why I specifically had been left out. I read the sentence again. Look at who paid for the wedding. The next morning, I called Karen and told her about the email. "That is a strange thing to focus on," she said. "Unless the money explains something." That possibility stayed with me all day. Weddings are expensive. The photographs alone showed a beautiful venue, professional decorations, catered meals, and dozens of guests. Someone had spent a significant amount of money. Michael earned a comfortable living, but he had always been careful with finances. In fact, only 6 months earlier he had told me he was postponing several home improvement projects because he wanted to save money. The more I thought about it, the less sense the wedding budget made. Later that afternoon, Karen called back unexpectedly. "You are not going to believe this," she said. "Remember my niece who had her rehearsal dinner at the Grand Oak?" "Yes." "She still knows one of the event coordinators." I sat up immediately. "And the wedding package was booked under a corporate account." That caught me completely off guard. A corporate account. That is what she was told. My mind immediately started racing. Michael did not own a company. Chloe did not own a company. So why would a business account be involved? That evening, Michael called again. His voice sounded exhausted. "Mom, I found something." "What happened?" I asked. "I was reviewing paperwork from the venue." My pulse quickened. "And?" He hesitated. "The final payments did not come from me." I closed my eyes. "Then who paid?" "That is the problem. I do not know." The answer stunned me. "You got married and do not know who paid for it." "I thought I did," he said quietly. "But the records do not match what I was told." Suddenly, the anonymous email seemed far less mysterious. Someone wanted us looking in exactly this direction. "Have you asked Chloe?" I said. Silence filled the line. "Michael. She says everything was handled through a family friend." "Which friend?" Another pause. "She will not tell me." I leaned back in my chair and stared at the ceiling. Every answer seemed to create another question. Then Michael said something that worried me more than anything else. Mom, I found the name of the account manager connected to the payments. Who is it? The same man from the wedding photos. My heart skipped. The stranger. The one Chloe seemed uncomfortable seeing in the background. Do you know him? I asked. No, Michael replied. But according to the paperwork, he has been involved in wedding planning decisions for months. I was about to respond when an email notification appeared on my computer screen. Another message from the same anonymous sender had arrived. This one contained only a single attachment, a screenshot of an old email. And at the bottom of that email was a sentence that made my blood run cold. Make sure Michael's mother never receives an invitation. I stared at the screenshot for a long time. The email looked authentic. It included dates, venue information, seating arrangements, and a chain of messages between event planners and someone whose name had been partially hidden. Yet one sentence remained completely visible. Make sure Michael's mother never receives an invitation. There it was. Not an accident. Not a misunderstanding. Not a lost address. A deliberate instruction. My hands trembled slightly as I forwarded the screenshot to Michael. Less than 10 minutes later, my phone rang. Mom, he said immediately. Where did you get this? Anonymous email. He was silent for several seconds. I have never seen it before. Do you think it is real? I asked. I do not know, he admitted. But the formatting matches documents from the planning company. His voice sounded shaken. For the first time since this began, I sensed that he was no longer defending what had happened. He was investigating it. The following afternoon, Michael called again. This time he sounded determined. I met with the venue manager. I sat down at my kitchen table. What did they say? They confirmed that someone repeatedly requested changes to the guest list. My stomach tightened. Who? They would not tell me directly because of privacy policies. Then how do you know? He hesitated. Because they showed me something else. I waited. An internal note attached to the account. My heart pounded. What kind of note? Michael exhaled slowly. It said that special attention should be given to avoiding family conflict involving the groom's mother. I closed my eyes. Even hearing those words hurt. That is me, I said quietly. I know. The sadness in his voice felt genuine. Then he added something unexpected. The manager also told me there was another person heavily involved in planning decisions. The man from the photographs? Yes. Who is he? A long pause followed. His name is Richard Hale. The name meant nothing to me. Do you know him? No, does Chloe? Another pause. Apparently very well. That answer stayed with me all evening. Why would a stranger be involved in wedding finances, guest lists, and planning decisions? None of it made sense. Later that night, Karen called with news of her own. Evelyn, I think I found something. My pulse quickened. What happened? My niece remembered Richard Hale. I sat upright immediately. From the venue? Yes. She said he attended several planning meetings. As what? Karen lowered her voice. Not as a vendor. Not as a coordinator. He acted like family. Family. The word echoed in my mind. Chloe rarely spoke about relatives. Her parents barely appeared in the wedding photographs. Yet this man was involved everywhere. The next morning, another email arrived from the anonymous sender. This time there was no screenshot. No explanation. Only a scanned copy of a property document. At the bottom of the page, two names appeared together. Chloe Parker, Richard Hale. And the date on the document showed they had been connected financially nearly 2 years before the wedding was ever announced. I printed the property document and placed it on my kitchen table. For the next hour, I stared at the two names at the bottom of the page. Chloe Parker, Richard Hale. The document itself was not illegal or scandalous. It simply showed a financial connection involving a small investment property purchased nearly 2 years earlier. But what troubled me was the timing. According to everything Michael had told me over the years, he had never met Richard until the wedding. Yet Richard had somehow become deeply involved in planning the event, controlling guest list decisions, and helping finance expenses. The connection was impossible to ignore. Later that afternoon, Michael called. I could tell immediately that something had changed. Mom, he said quietly, I spoke with Chloe. I held my breath. And she admitted she has known Richard for years. That alone was surprising enough. Who is he? Michael hesitated. A family friend. I closed my eyes. That is the same explanation she gave about the wedding payments. I know. His frustration was obvious. Every answer creates another question. We sat in silence for a moment. Then Michael said something that caught me off guard. I also spoke with James Whitmore. The name was familiar. James had handled legal matters for our family after my husband passed away years earlier. Why? I asked. Because I wanted to know whether Dad left anything behind that I should know about. My pulse quickened. Did he? Another pause. Apparently, there is a provision connected to the family lake house. I sat upright immediately. The lake house had belonged to Michael's father. It had been in our family for decades. What kind of provision? James would not discuss details over the phone. Michael sounded troubled. He wants to meet in person. The conversation stayed with me long after we hung up. That evening, I pulled out an old photo album containing pictures from summers at the lake house. Michael as a boy fishing from the dock. Family barbecues. Birthday celebrations. Memories that stretched across generations. I could not imagine why any of that would suddenly matter now. The following morning, Michael met with James. I spent hours waiting for an update. When my phone finally rang, his voice sounded stunned. "Mom," he said, "you need to hear this yourself." "Hear what?" Dad updated his estate documents 6 months before he died. My heart skipped. Why did nobody tell me? Because the changes were not activated. Activated. They only become relevant if someone attempts to sell the lake house. I felt a chill move through me. "Michael, what are you saying?" He exhaled slowly. "James showed me documents proving someone has recently been asking questions about transferring ownership." My stomach tightened immediately. "Who?" The silence on the other end of the line lasted several seconds. Then Michael finally answered. "The inquiries were submitted by an attorney representing Chloe." I stared at the family photographs spread across my table. Suddenly, the wedding no longer felt like the center of the story. It felt like the beginning of something much larger. And for the first time, I started to understand why someone had worked so hard to keep me out of sight. 3 days later, Michael asked if I would join him for dinner at a private room inside a small restaurant near the lake. His voice was calm when he called, but I could hear the determination beneath it. "I need everyone in the same room," he said. "No more phone calls. No more partial explanations." By the time I arrived, Michael was already there. Chloe sat across from him. Richard Hale occupied a seat near the end of the table. For the first time, I saw him clearly. He looked confident, but not comfortable. The moment he noticed me, his expression tightened. That alone told me he knew exactly who I was. The atmosphere felt heavy before a single word had been spoken. Michael waited until everyone was seated. Then he placed a folder in the center of the table. "I spent the last week reviewing records," he said. "Wedding records, property records, legal documents." Nobody interrupted him. "I also met with James Whitmore." Chloe lowered her eyes. Richard remained silent. Michael opened the folder and removed several pages. "I was told the wedding was kept small to reduce stress." He looked directly at Chloe. "That was not true." He placed photographs on the table. "I was told the planning happened quickly." More documents followed. "That was not true either." Nobody argued. The silence itself felt like an admission. Then Michael slid the anonymous email screenshot across the table. The one containing the instruction about excluding me. Chloe stared at it for several seconds. "Where did you get that?" she asked quietly. "That is not the important question anymore," Michael replied. "The important question is whether it is real." Chloe did not answer. Richard shifted uncomfortably in his chair. Michael continued. "Then there is the lake house." At those words, Richard looked away. Michael noticed. So did I. "The attorney inquiries came from a firm connected to Richard," Michael said. "The wedding payments came through accounts connected to Richard. The planning decisions involved Richard. Yet somehow I was expected to believe he was only a family friend." The room fell silent again. Finally, Chloe spoke. Her voice sounded tired. "It was never supposed to happen like this." Michael leaned back in his chair. "Then tell us how it was supposed to happen." For the first time since this began, Chloe stopped avoiding the truth. She admitted that Richard had been advising her on financial decisions for years. She admitted that discussions about the lake house had taken place long before the wedding. She admitted that excluding me had been intentional because she feared I would question decisions she wanted kept private. Hearing it spoken aloud hurt, but it also brought clarity. The uncertainty disappeared. The pieces finally fit together. Then Michael removed one final document from the folder and placed it on the table. It was a copy of his father's estate provision. Richard's expression changed immediately. Chloe looked stunned. "James explained everything," Michael said calmly. "The lake house cannot be transferred the way you expected." For the first time all evening, Richard looked genuinely worried. And in that moment, I realized the conversation was no longer about a wedding. It was about a plan that had just fallen apart. For several moments, nobody spoke. The restaurant seemed unusually quiet, as though even the world outside had paused to listen. Michael looked at the document one final time before setting it down. Dad knew what he was doing, he said calmly. He wanted to protect the lake house from being transferred unless specific conditions were met. Those conditions were never met. Richard slowly leaned back in his chair. The confidence he had carried into the room was gone. Chloe looked equally stunned. It was clear she had expected a very different outcome. Michael folded his hands together. I spent years believing this wedding was the most important event in my life, he said. Now I realize the real issue was trust. Nobody argued. There was nothing left to deny. The records had spoken for themselves. The emails had spoken for themselves. Every explanation had eventually led back to the same truth. Decisions had been made behind closed doors. Information had been hidden. People had been excluded. Not because of necessity, because it was convenient. Chloe stared at the table for a long time before finally speaking. I never planned for things to go this far. Her voice sounded fragile. At first, I only wanted to avoid conflict. Michael nodded slowly. And then, tears filled her eyes. Then every lie required another lie. Nobody interrupted. I convinced myself I was protecting our future, she continued. I told myself that if I could keep everything organized, everyone would be happier later. She looked toward me. Instead, I hurt people who did not deserve it. I studied her face. For the first time since this began, I saw something different. Not defensiveness. Not manipulation. Regret. Genuine regret. Richard quietly gathered his papers. I think my role here is finished, he said. Michael did not stop him. Neither did Chloe. Within moments, he was gone. The silence that followed felt lighter somehow, as though the source of so much confusion had finally left the room. Michael turned toward me. Mom, I owe you an apology. I shook my head gently. You owe yourself honesty first. His eyes filled with emotion. I should have asked more questions. Maybe, I said. But people trust the ones they love. That is not a weakness. For the first time all evening, he smiled. A small smile, but a real one. Over the next hour, conversations replaced accusations. Explanations replaced assumptions. Nobody could change what had happened. The wedding photographs would always exist. The missing invitation would always hurt. But the truth was finally sitting at the table with us. And truth has a way of creating room for healing. Several weeks later, I stood on the dock of the family lake house watching the sun settle across the water. Michael was repairing a section of railing nearby. Chloe and Sophie were arranging chairs for a family barbecue. The atmosphere felt different now. Not perfect. Real. Honest. Earned. As I looked across the lake, I thought about the phone call that had started everything. At the time, I believed I had lost my place in my son's life. Instead, the painful discovery had uncovered something far more valuable. It exposed secrets that needed daylight. It forced conversations that should have happened years earlier. Most importantly, it reminded all of us that families are not held together by ceremonies, photographs, or appearances. They are held together by truth. Michael walked over and handed me a glass of iced tea. You know, he said, smiling. Next time there is a family celebration, you will be the first person invited. I laughed softly. That sounds like a very good tradition. And as the evening sun reflected across the water, I realized something unexpected. They had excluded me from a wedding. But in the end, the truth brought me back to my family.